The emotional element represents the way the experience makes your customers feel. And the reason it's the most important of the three is because the way the experience makes your customers feel is what they're most likely to remember.
Welcome to episode 100 on the Master Your Business podcast, the show that helps you, yes you, build a thriving business that lights your soul on fire and helps fill your bank account. I'm your host, Deirdre Martin, and it's all about helping you hit those juicy milestones, whether that's your first 100,000 or your first million or beyond in your business. I'm super excited that you're here, and I'm super excited that this is episode 100. You know, just the other day I was chatting with a client, and this particular client is freaking fantastic at what he does. He's a whiz at what he does. He absolutely helps deliver incredible results to his clients. But the one thing he was really struggling with was attracting new business. So keeping the current customers, no problem. Getting new business in the door, not so great, right? If this sounds familiar, it's freaking hard work, right? And it comes down to a lot of brand and message and things like that. But it can be really frustrating when those new clients are just not trickling in like you know they should or could. And if you've been there, I'm sure it sounds familiar. It's happened to me too, so it's definitely familiar for me. But get this, what we did was we sat down and we dug a little bit deeper, and what we realized was he hadn't actually really properly created a customer journey map. And a customer journey map is a crucial element because a customer journey often gets mistaken for what is a process map. And those are the steps that you need to take behind the scenes in your business for a client to get from A to B. But actually, what he missed was the steps the clients have to take, and subsequently how they feel at each of the touch points that they have with his business throughout that journey. He never once factored the feelings his clients had. And folks, remember this, people are creatures of emotion. We're human beings, we're made up of feelings. So it wasn't enough that he was good at what he did. It's not enough for any of us to be just good at what we do. We need to create an experience because experiences make our clients feel seen, heard, and valued. And that, my friends, is why for episode 100, I'm so excited to be diving into exactly that today. I've got such a treat for you. I've got the OG of customer experience himself, Ian Golding. Ian is a global customer experience superstar. I'm going to call him a superstar. He's worked with everyone from tiny startups to giants like General Electric. And if you're a solopreneur or a small business owner, he's just like us. So he really does get it. And he's here, he's going to spill the beans on how you can create a customer experience that not only wows your clients, but also fuels sustainable growth in your small business. So in the episode today, stay tuned. Seriously, get pen and paper. I am sure I'm going to take so many notes from Ian. I would probably interview him for the whole day if I possibly could, because he's just so full of knowledge and information and practical advice. And that's exactly what you're going to discover. So we're going to talk about how to make your customer experience intentional, not accidental, why focusing on keeping clients is just as important as finding and winning them, and the simple but powerful strategies that you can implement today to build a business that truly thrives. Oh, and before we dive in, do me one favor. Don't forget to show the podcast some love. If you enjoy the episode, leave us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcast. It helps us to reach even more entrepreneurs who are amazing, just like you. So for episode 100, let's get this party started. I can't believe it. I've got the OG of CX on my show. Woo! Ian Golding, welcome.
You know what? I wish my kids would have that kind of reaction. Why do people want selfies with you, Dad? As well.
Oh, Ian, genuinely, it's really such a pleasure to have you here. And before we started recording, I said it and I meant it. I quote you regularly in terms of CX content, and a lot of the things I talk about from CX customer experience, for those of you who are just joining in now or listening for the first time, they're all down to you, Ian. So why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about you and CX and all of those things to just get us started?
Absolutely. And let me start by saying, if there's anything that you've heard Deirdre say that you think is rubbish, okay, that was nothing to do with me. So, but thank you for saying such nice things. For those of you who've never heard me speak before, I am a global customer experience specialist. I always have to say that it's a real job, even though it doesn't sound like one. And, me and Deirdre are the same. We do the same thing, but it's still something that many don't quite understand. My mum still doesn't know what it is that I do. And I'm very pedantic about using the word specialist because I'm not an expert. Everyone calls me that, but I'm not. No one's an expert when it comes to this stuff. We live in a world that's so complex that our role as specialists is to never stop learning. And despite the fact I'm not grey, I've been doing this for almost 30 years, 17 years on the inside of corporate organizations. But over the last almost 13 years, I've now worked in 60 countries, 60. I still have to pinch myself to remind myself of that. Every industry you can imagine, public sector, private sector, but also I have done a lot with SMEs as well as gigantic corporations and everything in between. So I've got a very unusual insight into the way customer experience and experience management in general is evolving around the world. And in recent times, I'm seeing more and more SMEs actually want to just find out more, what is this all about? And it's quite interesting to see that. And I'll finish by saying that I host a lot of award ceremonies for customer experience. And the UK Customer Experience Awards were at Wembley Stadium a couple of weeks ago. And an SME, it's a manufacturing business, won a gold award for the second consecutive year. And he was the only CEO in the room. There were almost 1,000 people, and that in itself is very significant because for SMEs, this is personal. This is your baby. This means something to you. And the fact that we still find it difficult to engage CEOs in what we do, SMEs is different. It's a different battleground. So I thought it'd be interesting for you to hear that.
Yeah, amazing. And like again, like I said to you before we started recording, a lot of what I do with clients is very much customer experience, but I don't always call it that because
Mm.
people already believe that they're very good at customer experience, and a lot of them are. But one of my other Wix or CX heroes, who's the founder of Wix, will say that a lot of people are, or was it you, Ian, who I quote in this? I'm like, I can't remember now, but will have said that a lot of people with their customer experience, it's incidental instead of
Ah,
intentional.
yes. So it was me, but not
Mm,
so. Claire is great, but it was me. But what I say is it's accidental.
mm,
So I think what you see in smaller organizations is that there being a very close connection between the people that work in that business and the customers that they're interacting with, because it is personal. You know people by name. I sometimes try and take people back to sort of 1900. When you walked into a shop, the shopkeeper knew who you were. And I think that kind of principle is still the same in an SME. You know who your customers are. You know them personally. And as a result, people will do whatever they think they can do to give that person the experience they want. The challenge for SMEs is as you grow, because as you grow, you bring people into the business that weren't there on day one. They don't necessarily have the same philosophy. They don't really understand, how important it is. And it's how do you ensure that the experience they're delivering is intentional? The same experience that you deliver, but you can't just assume it's going to happen. And if you don't make the experience intentional, that's when it becomes accidental because it will depend who your customer is talking to, who they're interacting with, as to what the experience is going to feel like.
And Ian, with that, okay, so some people may not know, or if they've listened to the show, we have had some other CX professionals on the show, and they have talked a little bit about what CX is.
Yes.
Well, I would love to hear from your perspective what it is and why it's so important to small businesses, even solopreneurs like a coach or a consultant or a really small SME business. So,
Yeah.
how would you describe what it is and why it's so
So
important?
what I will start by saying is that I call customer experience a science. Now, people watching this may never have even considered something like customer experience to be a science. But whilst I call it that, it's not rocket science. And what is vitally important is that your perception of what Deirdre does, what I do, is complicated, because it isn't. But the difficulty with what we do is that many massively overcomplicate it. And there's so much noise out there that it does become quite confusing. So one of my mantras is that if it feels too difficult, stop, because it's wrong. Okay. This doesn't have to be difficult. But the challenge with customer experience is that there is structure to it. There are capabilities and competencies that are required for the words to become reality. Now, the theory behind it is really easy. Customer experience, that is a discipline that represents everything that your organization does. Everything. What that means is that it is a representation of sales, marketing, customer service, operations, legal, HR, everything the organization does. There is still, Deirdre, you and I were talking before about this, still there's lingering confusion as to the difference between customer service and customer experience. That's global still, but customer service is not the same thing. It's one of those elements that makes up the whole experience. And the objective for any organization that is interested in the subject is to understand why the experience is important. And it's important because the better able you are at delivering the experience to your customer, the more likely it is that your customers will be happy with you. And as a result, you will develop a relationship with those customers that will deliver sustainable growth. So the objective of the experience is not recognizing that you have it, okay? Because every organization has an experience, whether you like it or not. The objective is to continuously improve the ability of that experience to be better able at meeting the needs and expectations of your customers. And if you're going to improve the experience, 3 elements you need to think about: the functional element, the accessible element, and the emotional element. The functional element represents your products and your services. Now, every industry knows today that you cannot differentiate on your products and services alone. Our markets are so saturated, your customers have got a choice of where they buy the product. And what you don't want as an SME to be having an argument over price, because that's where it will default to. So what a lot of organizations are now looking towards is the accessible element to differentiate. How easy is it for your customers to interact with your products and services? Principle being, the more accessible the experience becomes, the more likely it is your customers will want to interact with you rather than one of your competitors. Now, being in the Republic of Ireland, you do not need me to tell you that the best example of the accessible experience is Amazon, because they have created the most accessible retail experience on earth. Now, obviously, Amazon are not an SME. We know that. But what we've got to think about with Amazon, they don't sell anything that's unique. Amazon sell exactly the same stuff as everyone else. In fact, they may even sell your stuff. Okay. So the thing about Amazon is it is not the products that differentiate them. It's how easy they make it to get to those products. So if your customers think you're difficult to do business with, potentially that will kill you, because if someone else is easier, that you're going to have a problem. However, and I'm cutting to the chase, Deirdre. I know I start rambling.
Oh, it's great. I'm
Um,
like, I'm lapping it up. I'm like, I love the Amazon example. And
but
the accessibility as a differentiator. Yes.
absolutely. But it's the third element that's the most important of the three. And this actually, I think, is where SMEs can still steal a march on others, because the emotional element represents the way the experience makes your customers feel. And the reason it's the most important of the three is because the way the experience makes your customers feel is what they're most likely to remember. And with all experiences, they'll remember one of three things: very good things, very bad things, or nothing at all. And it's that third outcome that's the worst of the three. Because if there's no recollection of the experience, it means there's no emotional connection between you and your customer. Even if something goes wrong, and things will always go wrong, you've got the opportunity to fix it. So your customer remembers the way you corrected it rather than what went wrong in the first place. So what we need to be asking ourselves is, what are customers remembering about their experience with us? Because if they're not remembering anything, that's a problem. You know, if you're correcting things that go wrong, that's good. But you need to really start worrying if you're not creating that emotional connection.
Oh my gosh, that makes so much sense and resonates so much with me as well. And I think from a feeling part, a lot of the marketing that I help people with in terms of their brand, one of the key things that we make sure to include is emotion.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, people are creatures of emotion, and it's not just that emotional experience they have when they come in to be your client. It's emotion is often the thing that will help them make the decision and purchase in the first
100. Do you know
place.
that this is actually one of the biggest mistakes that all organizations make around the world when they measure the experience?
Hmm.
Because as again, many of your clients are aware, most people watching this are aware, is that net promoter score is something that everyone likes to measure. You know, would you recommend me? But what's fascinating is that very few organizations are asking that question to customers who didn't buy anything. Okay. And, you know, so when you're thinking about how do you market your business, if you never actually engage with people that came onto your website, had a look, and left without doing anything, you know, you are going to jump to entirely the wrong conclusion. And this is why most organizations are doing just that. The silent majority who look but don't buy, they don't ask anything. But you know, why are they not buying? You know, is it because you don't have the products they want? Your delivery times are too long, you're too expensive. I mean, that's where the rich information is. And again, it's another demonstration that customer experience is not just about the buying, it's about the end-to-end customer journey. And it's as important, you can argue even more important, for an SME to know all of that. You know, otherwise you're going to find it difficult to achieve sustainable growth.
Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting from multiple perspectives, because it's not just about what they're experiencing, you know, as we said, before they buy and but during they buy, but it's also when they come near the end of their relationship. And
Yes,
when I say relationship, I'm talking relationship, folks, and not transaction, because the relationship doesn't end when the transaction ends.
that's right.
But towards the end of the relationship, in terms of the emotions then and retention, Ian, because retention is huge from a customer experience perspective, and the value and benefits of it. So could you maybe speak to that for a few minutes and
Well, only if you allow me to introduce you to my flip chart.
oh
So,
yes, please.
so I can't do a conversation without introducing my flip chart or whiteboard. So the best way to respond to this is, among other organizations, as an employee, I used to work for GE, General Electric. So many people will have heard of GE. Used to be one of the biggest companies in the world, sadly no longer is, but it also used to be one of the most customer-centric organizations in the world. And you might not be old enough, Deirdre, but some people watching will be old enough to remember Jack Welch, who was CEO of GE for around 20 years in the 80s and 90s. And if you Google him, I mean, still his philosophy, it's WELCH. his philosophy on leadership and management is just amazing. But one of the things that I was taught in the very early days of my career at GE in the 90s was one of Jack Welch's mantras, the mantra of find, win, keep. And hopefully you can see this. So what Jack Welch said, and at the time, GE had hundreds of businesses all around the world. And he said that when he was working with all of their different organizations around the world, working in different industries, what he observed is that strategically, these businesses were top heavy. What he meant is that they were spending all of their time developing a strategy that was all about finding new customers and winning their business. And so when you looked at even resources, budget, people, it was all focused on finding and winning. But what he then observed is that no one was focusing on the keeping, and among other things, I'm the course director for customer experience for the Chartered Institute of Marketing in the UK. And there is a marketing expression that I really don't like, really don't like, and that's the marketing funnel. Who came up with the idea of a marketing funnel? Let's pour loads of stuff in the top so loads of stuff can then come out the bottom. It's like, what? That's what leads to this obsession with finding and winning. We've got to keep topping it up. Okay, but actually, we shouldn't have to keep topping it up if we're doing a good job of the keeping. And customer experience represents all three of these things. It is our ability to understand strategically who are the customers that we need in the first place. How are we then going to create a relationship with them that means that they don't want to just buy once, but they want to develop a strong relationship over time? And so this mantra of find, win, keep, I would say to anyone watching this, if you look at your strategy, will your strategy enable to do all three of those things? Because if it at the moment is just focused on the finding and winning, again, I keep using the word sustainable growth. You're not going to achieve sustainable growth because you're going to be spending too much time at the front end and not enough time developing those strong relationships over time. Does that answer the question?
Yes, 100%. And I think as well, it's I mean, the statistics around customer retention in terms of benefits to a business are significant too.
Yep.
I think they've decreased if the statistics I read most recently are accurate, because I think originally when I learned about customer experience, it was over 10 years ago now, and it used to be about 70%. It was 70% more cost effective to retain your current client. That's dropped now, isn't it? It's like around 50% or so.
To be honest, I don't know. I haven't seen any numbers recently, but even if it's dropped, it's still a far more effective way of running your business. Constantly trying to find new customers. Even myself as an SME, because I have to remind myself that I am an SME. I've been in business for almost 13 years now, but the number of clients I have that have been clients for 13 years, but not in the same company. As they move to a different business, they come because it's all about relationships. And I have the pleasure of knowing one of the guys who created the Ritz-Carlton's approach to customer experience. He's a Dutch guy. I won't say his name because I can never pronounce it properly. And he now is in the US, and he's replicated the Ritz-Carlton approach to customer experience in private hospitals in the US. And he says that this is all about relationships. He said if you'd have gone into one of the hotels he managed at the Ritz-Carlton, he knew the name of every employee. He knew the name of their partners, their children. He knew the name of every customer coming in the door, even if it was the first time. He made it his business to know. He wasn't running a hotel. He was managing relationships, and that's the way he will always describe what experience management is all about.
Oh, that's so powerful. And ultimately, as a small business owner, the sense is that people, when I've done my market research, like qualitative research, conversations with people, everybody who I've spoken to has said that they want to do business with an SME or a business or a company who they can have a relationship with and who they
Yes.
feel they trust. And that absolutely ties in with what you've just said.
It does.
Mm.
But trust is it's such an important word. And actually, it doesn't matter whether it's an SME or a huge corporation. That I think what's difficult for SMEs is in the nature of the world we live in today, that is a mess, quite frankly. Wherever you look, there's so many challenges. I think consumers in general are losing trust with everyone. So, if a government misbehaves, if a big corporation misbehaves, it actually means that we as SMEs are going to suffer as well, because people become less trusting of what we're being told. And that then means it's even more important for organizations to demonstrate sincerity, authenticity, and just say it as it is. Be very clear. Now, you probably anticipated at some point during this conversation I was going to mention an Irish airline, okay, because it probably always comes up. Okay? but Ryanair get a rough deal, okay, in the way people, now some of it is deserved, but actually some of the rough deal is down to the way one particular person communicates, which is not particularly well done. Actually, if you strip away all of that, Ryanair don't pull the wool over your eyes. They say it as it is. That this is what we're going to do, and this is what we do. Now, if you don't like it, that's okay, and you have to have a lot of respect for that. I think what they demonstrate is what I call clarity of proposition. It's always been completely clear, and if you don't want it, don't buy it. But people do want it. Now, and people will always moan and complain about everything. But right now, if I can, short haul, I will fly Ryanair, because they are the most likely of everyone in that industry to fulfill the basic requirement of getting me there. And that's what I want. And actually, do I need someone to smile at me? Do I need a wet towel? No, just get me there. So I think, if you can combine a little bit more humility and sensitivity with that clarity of proposition, then you've got a very good business model. And actually, that's I think it doesn't cost anything to smile, and that's why I have noticed a lot of Ryanair crew now. They do smile. They are much nicer than they used to be.
I agree.
And it doesn't cost anything to do that.
Yeah, fantastic. And you're so right in terms of their positioning and how they do it. They do it so exceptionally well. And they are really, the CEO is quite radical in some ways in his communication, but they are quite transparent. It's like,
Yes,
this is what's on the tin. Don't expect anything more.
that's right.
Okay.
But we shouldn't be afraid of doing that. But I think there is a bit of theatre behind it. Obviously it gets a lot of attention, but actually for an SME, you wouldn't want to necessarily do that. But actually, that same principle of it does what it says on the tin, but with a smile, with that you can't go wrong with that, because then people believe. They believe in you. They know that you're not trying to rip them off. They know that, and it works. And again, in my own experience, I've done many things over the years that it didn't make me any money, but that wasn't the point, because I don't exist to make money. I exist to fulfill the purpose that I have, and the better I do that, the more money I make. So and if we can change that mindset a little bit, because if we're just chasing short-term financial return, that then the most important thing are the numbers, not the people, the numbers. But if our main priority is people, the numbers will come. And I have always believed that, and I always will.
I agree. And I think if you focus on the people, you'll actually have a long-term sustainable business.
Absolutely.
As opposed to short-term ones where it's cash.
Absolutely.
And Ian, you touched earlier a little bit on strategy piece. So imagine me, I'm sitting at home. Usually I'm in the podcast studio today, but usually I'm sitting at home in my home office. I work online with people, and like I've mapped out my customer journeys from literally end to end, and with every product I have. but not everybody knows how to do it or what a customer experience strategy might look like. And I know you've touched on find, win, keep,
Yes.
and you've touched on the others as well. But if this was like totally new to me and I'd never heard of anything before, what kind of
Okay.
key elements would you recommend that I make sure to incorporate into a really
It's a very
solid
good
CX
question.
strategy?
So again, I'll repeat what I said earlier. It's not complicated. Strategy is not a dark art. Okay. Now, many organizations think they need big consultancies to come and develop big PowerPoint. No. Okay. For a customer experience perspective, developing a customer experience strategy is actually quite easy. Okay. Because there are two parts to it: creating it and then communicating it. And actually, the communicating it bit is harder than creating it. But I believe that a customer experience strategy can be created on one page. And those of you watching this that don't have a customer experience strategy, I urge you to reach out to Deirdre and just talk to her about it, because you can do this very quickly. And it is not something that's going to cost you huge amounts of money. The simplest description I can give you of what a customer experience strategy is that it is a description of what you want the experience for your customers to be, how you want your customers to feel every time they interact with you. Now, to be able to do that, to define that, you do need customer insight. So you do need to have a good understanding of the needs, wants, and expectations of your customers. But if you have that, then you can create the strategy. And typically, I recommend the following elements to go into the strategy. So firstly is a description of purpose. Now, coming back to the Ryanair example, Ryanair's purpose right now is low fares made simple. That's why Ryanair exists. Okay, originally their purpose was low fares guaranteed, but they changed it to low fares made simple. You need to be clear as to what your purpose is, not what your vision is, what your purpose is. Why do you exist for your customers? Because then you need to ask yourself, okay, how am I going to make that happen? And so the second element of your strategy is a description of ambition. But you need to define 3 types of ambition. Firstly, the ambition of the business. Now, this is pointing a finger at your business strategy, profit, revenue, growth, whatever it might be, because you need to make sure that you are doing what you need as a business to fulfill your strategic requirements. The second ambition is customer ambition. What is a summary of the needs, wants, and expectations of your customer? And when I say summary, I mean summary. I don't mean war and peace. I don't mean, break your customer base down into 700 different types of... No, just elevate to a very simple descriptor of, well, they want things to be easy. They want it to be quick. They want, how would you summarize it? But the third ambition is one that many completely forget about, and that's the ambition of your people. Now, you may be a business with 10 people. You may have 100 people, but you can't do what you do without them. And so it's just as important to understand what are their needs, wants, and expectations. Because if you don't deliver their ambition, you're not going to deliver the ambition of the business or the customer. And as a result, your purpose will never come to life. And the next part, and I know I'm asking people just to sort of visualize this, is if that has been understood, how should you design what you do every day to enable the ambitions to come to life? This is where you talked before about the customer journey. Now, many people might not even know what a customer journey is, but if you think about whatever your customer is interacting with in their relationship with you, how should you design those interactions so that you're able to fulfill their ambition, your ambition, and achieve the purpose? And these are what many will describe as design principles. but it means that you're being very, coming back to the word, intentional about the way you're doing things. And the final part of the strategy is then, if you get all of that in place, how do you want the customer to feel as a result of all of that? How do you want the customer to feel every time they interact with you? Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what I mean by this, but you must not hold this against me, okay? This is prior to COVID that I worked with Dublin Airport. Okay? Now,
No comment.
this is why. So it was before COVID. Obviously, COVID's come. So what I'm about to say to you isn't in existence anymore. In about 2017, 2018, they were working hard to develop their passenger experience strategy. And their desired passenger experience was to leave passengers feeling cared for and looked after. Okay. That was their ambition at the time. So every time we interact with a customer, we've got to ask ourselves, did we make them feel cared for? Did we make them feel looked after? Now, I know in 2024 that a lot of the time that is not the case. But the reason I say it is it's very simple. Again, defining what you want the experience to be is not complicated. Okay. But you've then got to make sure that everyone understands what that means and the role they play in delivering it. And I'll give out just one more example. Global financial services company, their desired customer experience, they called EVP, easy, valued, peace of mind. Every time we interact with a customer, we've got to ask ourselves, did we make it easy for the customer? Did we make them feel valued? Did we give them peace of mind? And by defining that experience, you're then in a position to ensure that every employee, whether it's 10, 100 or 500, knows what that is. So they can then ask themselves, are we doing that? They then know that's the objective, not just to fulfill the task I've got, but to fulfill the task and leave my customer feeling that way. It's not complicated, but what it requires is, once it's been identified, constant communication, and constantly driving it into the mindset of your people. That's how you make the experience intentional rather than accidental.
That's great. And I think even knowing what those principles are, those feelings, they become like guiding principles. They become nearly like decision-making tools.
Exactly.
Don't they? Yeah.
It's because it also, again, if the culture is right, empowers your people to say to you as the boss, that actually is not going to deliver the experience we want. It allows them to challenge. Well, hang on, we need to change this because that's going to upset them. Well, okay, what do we need to do then? So I think we really need to just make it very, very simple for our people to understand. Do whatever you can, as long as that's how they feel. But without that strategy, people will just, go in any direction they think they can, or we just default to the finding and the winning, the business strategy of sales at any cost. And then the emotion goes out the window.
And Ian, again, some of the listeners here are solopreneurs. They literally work by themselves all day, every day. When is the right time for them to develop a strategy like this?
That's a brilliant question. Timing is everything. And, for me personally, my diary is a disaster. Well, trying to schedule me to do this, my diary is a disaster. But I think what my advice to a solopreneur is, we have got to give ourselves time to think. If we're just doing the do, there is no time to think. And we all learn the hard way. And it's a long time ago now, but in my second year as an independent, as a solopreneur, someone said to me, Ian, I love what you say. I love what you write. But what do you do? And I'm like, yeah, because I've not thought about how do I actually explain to people how I can help them. So I think we get so carried away in doing what we need to do to survive, to make money. We forget what needs to happen to thrive. And I think that's sort of something that's always in the back of my mind. Am I just surviving or am I thriving? But the only way you can thrive is to just stop a second and rethink, What do we need to do to make our ability to grow more effective? Because if we don't stop, you're just going to be on this treadmill, and you'll never be able to get off it. And I have been just as guilty of this as anyone else, because it's tough when you're a solopreneur, but you've got to make a decision. Do you want to carry on indefinitely, just getting by, or do you want to say no? Let's think a little bit smarter and figure out a better way of growing what I do sustainably in the future.
So literally take the time out now, schedule it and plan and think
Absolutely.
and get going.
Trust
And
is important.
in terms of tools or technologies that people could use, Ian, or integrate, and I know it's different maybe per industry, and there's maybe industry specific ones that are more beneficial than others. But for, again, a solopreneur who's maybe a coach or a consultant or a service provider, is there anything that, comes to mind for you that you're like, oh, definitely check out that software that would be really helpful for you?
So firstly, simple. One of the things I didn't say in my previous response is I said timing is everything, but pace is everything as well. This takes time. Evolving takes time, and you have to be patient. Well, one of the benefits of being a solopreneur is that you're in this for the long term, and so that means there is stability. Large organizations, leadership's changing all the time. So they're so unstable that sustaining the focus is difficult. But when it comes to technology, I think, again, you need to consider, why do you need the technology in the first place? Okay, because we're constantly sold to all the time. So AI at the moment. Now you've got AI that is note-taking our conversation. Okay, it's a game changer. No longer do you have to be scribbling down, and it's brilliant at doing it. Now that, for a solopreneur, is absolutely what we need to be looking for. I conduct assessments with my clients. And so when I do an assessment, I have to interview a lot of people. Now, historically, I've had to take notes and all of it, and then try and figure out what those notes are telling me. Because if you're doing 20 interviews in 3 days, I can't remember who said what. Now I've got AI that is actually taking the notes for me. Again, it makes my life so much easier. So I think we should be looking at how AI can help make things easier for us. But then when it comes to experience management itself, it all depends on maturity. So, and I'll explain what I mean by that. There is a brilliant customer experience management tool called Semantica. But I can tell you now, there are very experienced organizations, huge organizations, that aren't ready for it. Because they don't have the fundamental capabilities in place yet to be able to adopt something like that. Interestingly, there will be smaller organizations who probably are mature enough. So, but I think what we shouldn't be doing is adopting technology for technology's sake. It is really my response to this. Big organizations do. And as a result, they sort of force technology in, and it actually makes everything worse. For us, this is all about accessibility and simplicity. What can we use that makes life easier for us and for our customer? Because as a small business, it's bodies that's the problem, so it's not about replacing bodies, but it's about eliminating work that those bodies shouldn't have to do. What you want is for your people to focus on the most important thing. The most important thing being developing the relationships. So if you can find tools that will do the mundane, day-to-day tasks that the humans shouldn't have to be doing, it creates the capacity to allow them to focus on what's important.
Their customers.
Exactly.
Love it. That's such a really great explanation as well. And, one of the questions I have, and I think some businesses or people listening might be concerned about the potential cost of implementing a CX strategy. But really, what we're saying is that there doesn't need to be any cost, if even.
Time is the biggest cost.
Yeah.
I think depending, it always depends, the size of the organization, the nature of the organization. But I think investing time in learning is important, and also having the confidence to ask for help. But that help doesn't have to be, 30,000 euros kind of help. It isn't complicated. There are brilliant people like you who can have a conversation with you, allow you to understand the direction you need to go in. And it will not break the bank, but actually it could be a hugely important investment. But it's that time that is the biggest problem, because a day's worth of consulting or a day's worth of thinking about how I can develop my business. But this is the kind of decision that every CEO has to make. What do I embed? Return to shareholders or become more customer centric? No, return to shareholder. So it's going to be a constant battle, but it's those who are prepared to invest in developing their specialism. They are the ones who are most likely to survive, because the danger, I'll give you an example of the danger. You've got Revolut in Ireland.
We do.
Now, Revolut is turning into an amazing case study, but not in the way that they would want it to be an amazing case study, but because they are an amazing example of a disruptor that came in very small, driven by technology, totally, just smashed the market. I've had legacy banks come to me in different parts of the world saying, we're really worried about Revolut, but the problem is that that's generated hyper growth. I mean, they couldn't have imagined how successful it will be, but with that hyper growth, the wheels are now falling off because they can't sustain what they created, because they haven't thought about what happens as we get bigger. And so what they're now realizing is that they can't address problems. They haven't got the capacity to deal with things when they go wrong. And so now customers are going to the mainstream media, complain. And this is what happens. So if we just focus on the growth, and fancy cars and bottles of champagne, and I'm not saying that's what Revolut did, by the way, but you know what I mean? We get so caught up in this is amazing that suddenly we realize we've got a problem. And trying to unravel that is really hard.
That's so interesting as well, because I've had a client who's been a little bit like Revolut. Now they're not the size of Revolut, but if we were to go to scale, and something similar has happened to them. And insofar as that, where they've been, I've been working with them for several years now as well. And one of the things that had happened to them was that they started to scale, but then we needed to bring people in. We had to improve processes and systems. We had to take the CEO out a bit because he was a bottleneck in so much of business. And this was where, we had to look at where could we bring in tools and technology, what processes do we need to have in place, so that whole experience is seamless, irrespective of who the client gets to deal with.
Yeah.
It was really interesting. And then they got to a stage then where they had these systems, and it kind of comes in waves. It's interesting watching it as somebody on the outside watching it. It comes in waves, like the waves of growth. And for his business, he needs the people to serve them.
Yes.
And obviously that affects profitability because his overheads go up. So it's constantly a case of, where can we manage the costs and what tools can we bring in?
That's why the word is sustainable growth.
Yes.
But because again, if we come back to Amazon, Amazon were in the same situation as Revolut. It was tiny, but Jeff Bezos had a very intentional plan for how he was going to grow. And a lot of people don't like talking about Amazon, but we need to talk about Amazon.
Great example.
For anyone watching this, people don't know, because I don't know where you can find it, but there is a movie. It's a biopic of Jeff Bezos. Okay, it's called Bezos. So if you search for it, I don't know which platform. I watched it on a plane. The acting is terrible, so don't watch it for artistic value. But I think any business leader, whether they're an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, or they manage it, should watch that movie, because it actually really reminds you of what it was like at the beginning. Starting something from scratch, competing with huge multinational corporations who thought you were just ridiculous, and there's a brilliant bit in the movie where Jeff Bezos goes to see the CEO of Barnes and Noble, who at the time were the world's biggest bookseller. And he explained what he wanted to do. And the CEO of Barnes and Noble laughed at him and basically said, "You're an idiot. This is never going to work." A year later, the CEO of Barnes and Noble's advisors were saying to him, you need to be worrying about this. Already within a year, this is going to be a problem. And so he invited Jeff Bezos back and offered him $1 million to buy Amazon. And you said I could swear, but I won't swear. But you can imagine what Jeff Bezos said, okay? Because what Jeff Bezos knew is that this is going to work, but it's going to take time. But I've got the time. I'm patient. I know. And for 20 years, they didn't make anything. But he knew this is a long-term program, and it will, and now it's $1 trillion business, but we all know what it ended up being, but it took that person believing so much in the purpose that he wasn't going to compromise on the experience, which he didn't. It was all about the experience, and the rest is history.
Oh, such a fantastic example, Ian. And yeah, that's powerful. Anybody listening, you could be the next Jeff Bezos. Just
why not?
keep going.
Why not? You've got to have the belief and the courage, but you can. Anyone can do what Bezos did if you believe enough. We have to believe that.
We do. And one thing I really would like to ask you a question on, and I don't want to keep you on all day because it's I'm always learning as well. And every time I speak with you or listen to you speak, I learn something new. And for my solopreneurs, because I'm so conscious of supporting solopreneurs, from let's say mapping out their customer journey, I want to talk a little bit about this because they are, they maybe don't have the big money to invest in big things, and they don't want to spend tons of time figuring out tools and tech.
Yes.
They're still maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed about where to start with even mapping out a journey or an entire journey. What do you recommend as a starting point?
So again, I will keep reminding everyone, don't overcomplicate it. But I think there are a couple of things that I will say. And in fact, I'm going to come back to my white. What I will always suggest to any organization, let alone a solopreneur, is for you to think about the concept of what I call customer journey management. Okay. And customer journey management is a cycle of continuous interconnected activity that includes knowing who your customers are, so you can then visualize their journey, so you can then measure the journey to identify the small number of priorities having the greatest negative impact on customer perception and, as a result, financial performance. And when you know what the priorities are, you fix them, okay? Now, this is what I call the nirvana state of customer experience management, customer journey management. Now, what I can say with great confidence is that very few organizations around the world are doing this well, okay? Now, the reason I'm sharing this with you is that if you are a solopreneur, do you need to do all of this, okay? And my response to that is no, okay? You do not need to adopt an approach to customer experience management that is out of a textbook, okay? Because your business is going to be so agile, adapting all the time. There's so much going on, but what you need to really understand is what are your priorities. So how can you be very clear that the experience you're delivering is going to enable you to achieve the growth you want, so that you will have a very good idea of who your customers are, okay? But my view is what you need to determine is what does the journey look like today that you are delivering to those customers. Now, journey mapping is another topic that is overcomplicated. And so when you're thinking about your customer journey, I'm going to ask you to think about it in 2 levels. Is that on the screen? Sorry, yeah. Level 0 and level 1. Okay. Now, what do I mean by the level 0 journey? Now, I'm just going to rub this out so I can show you. When you're thinking about your customer journey, you need to think about it in the simplest way possible. Okay. You need to elevate out to the simplest view of the journey that you possibly can. And a customer journey, you perfectly described this earlier, Deirdre. What you want to think about with the journey is not a transaction. Okay. You want to think about the journey as a relationship. And what that means is that when you're thinking about the journey that your customers or clients have with you, you need to think about that as a continuous, never-ending relationship. Okay. And as a result, when I display the level 0 journey, I display it as a circle, because you want to understand, how do you keep your customers in that circle? And what you need to identify in that circle are the stages of that relationship. Okay. If I'll use the retail analogy, as we've been talking about Amazon. Okay. The level 0 journey for an online retailer, and I just so happen to work for one, is sorry, no, it isn't. I'm telling a lie. It's browse, buy, receive, and query. Okay. So if we want to shop online, the first thing we do is we browse. If we find what we want, we'll buy it. As long as you can rely on the courier, you'll receive what you bought, and then you may need to query what you bought. Don't like it, damage, whatever. That is the level 0 journey for online shopping. And what we need to know is, how good are we at doing that? Okay. Now, this is thinking about the journey in its simplest form. Within each of these stages are a number of touch points. Okay. But that's the next level of detail. So, website, app, payment, that's the detail. Okay. And it's so important when a solopreneur is thinking about their journey, what are the stages of that journey and what happens within each stage? That is the starting point. Okay. Do not worry about creating a pretty picture. Okay. It doesn't matter what it looks like, but what does it look like today? Okay. Because what you then need to ask yourself, having done that, is when you think about the journey as it is now, is that journey differentiating? Okay. And what I mean by that is the way that your customer is interacting with you, are those interactions things that they take as given? Or do those interactions exceed their expectation? Something that exceeds expectation is unique to you. No one else does it. Okay. It is very common for us to think about the journey in its simplest form and realize that it's made up entirely of basic interactions. Everyone does the same thing. Okay. And it then just becomes a bit of a battle of personality, maybe, but there's nothing that exceeds. So what we need to be thinking about is, what's the reality of today, but what do we need to get to in the future? Okay. If we're going to differentiate what we do, how are we going to do it? How are we going to get to the future? And it's then all about determining how we close the gap. I think not enough big businesses think this way. But for a solopreneur, do not overcomplicate it. Just think about it in that simple form. And that will just help you to get a sense of, what could I do going forward to sprinkle fairy dust onto the journey, for want of a better description.
That's such a lovely way to look at it as well. And, actually, I think that's a really nice way to describe it too, from a marketing perspective. There's 2 ways that you can apply that technique. And I think because the 0 version even, and once it gets to the
Yes.
1 level, is because sometimes what happens is communicating to people in your marketing. These are the steps. These are the
Yeah.
stages you go through. So that client could have browse, buy, receive as this is the 3-step plan to getting what you
Uh,
want. Browse, buy, receive,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So it's like really simple. And I
Very
think
simple.
people are so inclined to overcomplicate it. I think our brains are hardwired to make things way more complex than
Well,
they need to be.
it's unfortunately, human beings are slightly flawed. But yeah, we do like to overcomplicate, but we mustn't. Life's complicated enough, but the simpler you keep it. And the only other advice I would give to a solopreneur is co-create the journey with a client. You're in a very good position that you've probably got great relationships with your clients. And they'll probably do you a favor and say, look, I really want to understand this. Just explain to me, what do you do? How does it look to you when you go through the journey? Because the most important thing in visualizing that journey is to describe it as the customer would describe it. So get them to tell you in their own words. That'll really clarify in your mind, because we make too many assumptions, so don't make an assumption, just ask them and see what they say. And it might actually open your eyes a bit.
Great idea, and so simple to do. And I have one final question I'm going to ask before we wrap things up, and that is because it's come up in terms of customer journey pieces, that onboarding bit, and the little things that you can do to enhance experiences that nobody else is doing, and how to make that onboarding bit seamless. So from a service perspective, that's one that's come up in my community a few times
Really?
recently. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
What I'm about to say, you may not anticipate I'm about to say,
Okay,
but
great.
the first thing is, do not use the term onboarding. It comes back to what I just said. Actually, no customer will ever say to you, "I've just been onboarded." And that in itself is the mindset shift.
Yeah.
But because what that means is that you're thinking about what you're doing to them. Okay, what you've got to be thinking about is, what do they want to do and how do they want to do it? And it sounds so subtle, but it's so important. And every week when I'm doing my masterclasses and various other things, I get people to map journeys. And in every B2B, they'll have a stage called onboarding. And I'm like, no. So my biggest advice is that when you are thinking about that initial stage of the journey, is use customer language. Okay, what do they actually do, and how do they actually do it? So that there are two things to think about. One is steps, and the other is touch points. So the step describes what do they do. The touch point describes how they do it. Okay. And that's what you've got to do. But you genuinely have to put yourself in their shoes. So if you are them, what do I do? Okay. But write it like that. That's how simple it needs to be. And I'm going to ban the use of the word onboarding.
I love that. I don't disagree with you. And I've probably admittedly been using it in my community, but I'm going to change it now and set up an activate or something. And like I think for there's some examples. The one example I often give is that, if I get my new iPhone, it's so easy for me to activate that new iPhone and get it set up straight away. But if I'm brand new to Apple and I don't know how to activate my iPhone or how to get it set up, where are the steps and what should I do that are clear to me?
Exactly.
So that's where you're coming from with that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and they've got the whole unboxing experience. And I think this is where service providers get a little bit like jealous. Sometimes as a service provider, I have to admit, I say it to people in my community who have products. I mostly work with service-based businesses, but I have one client who has products, but it's a product service, if you know what I mean. It's like a subscription service. But she has this whole unboxing experience. And I'm like, you've got this tangible thing that you can show people.
That's because they've been thinking, an expression I use over and over again is end to end. Okay. And actually, again, a lot of what I do is unintentional, actually, but I sort of do the same thing, because anyone that comes to a physical masterclass with me gets two things. and it's just something I do, but it's part of the whole experience. They get a customer experience stress ball, okay, which was never intended to look like me, but sort of does look a bit like me. And they also get my pen, and because everyone loves a multicolored pen like that. But that's sort of my equivalent of the unboxing, because anyone can go to customer experience training, but they're not going to get an Ian Golding pen. And it's not, but again, the reason I use this as an example, it's not complicated, but actually people remember the pen, and it's thinking that way. It's those little touches that are all about understanding that end-to-end experience that make the difference.
Fantastic. Ian, oh my gosh, look, I've got a whole page of notes. It was so fantastic chatting with you. And tell us what's coming up for you in 2025. What's happening in you and your business?
Well, things just continue as crazily as they always are. By the end of this year, I'll be up to country 61. So I'm going to Georgia in December. I've never been to Georgia, but I've got the Saudi Customer Experience Awards coming up. So just much of the same. The difference now is that we're back to normal from a travel perspective. So I'll be visiting lots of different countries next year. I'm going to Moldova next year. Again, I will continue to focus on investing my time in helping professionals that really want to learn, whilst at the same time continuing to work with companies that want to understand how to operationalize all of this. So still a mixture between sharing knowledge and consulting, but I will always work with people that have that desire to learn.
Amazing. And for anybody who wants to learn more about CX, Ian's fabulous book is there behind him. Customer what?
That's my inability to sell. I just leave it there because it's easier that way.
Definitely go and check that out from Amazon,
It is correct.
What other books, Ian, would you recommend that people
So
read?
right now, and I have to remember where I've put it, the book I would recommend is this one. It's called Experience Rules by two friends of mine, Michael Hinshaw and Diane Majors. The reason is that it contains a customer experience framework known as the Experience Operating System that I am now recommending to my clients. So I teach an educational framework. What they've created is what I call an operational framework. So if you want to really understand the mechanics, this is the book. Absolutely.
Wow. Fantastic. You heard it here, folks. Ian, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It's been a pleasure. Like I said, folks, the OG of CX.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for asking me, Deirdre.
Thank you, Ian.
Wow. What an incredible conversation with the amazing Ian Golding. I don't know about you, my head is buzzing with ideas. My hand hurts from taking all of the notes. And like I said, it was going to be a whopper. It was a doozy for episode 100, don't you think? Okay, so let's recap on some of the great nuggets that Ian shared today. Firstly, remember that building a thriving business, it's about way more than just delivering a great service. It's about creating an experience that leaves your clients feeling truly valued and understood. So if you're using the words like onboarding externally with your clients, lose it, ditch it, dump it, do whatever. And start thinking instead about your customer journey as a continuous, ever evolving relationship. And what I would say at this point actually is there's a fantastic podcast episode that I would encourage you to go back and watch, because it ties into that. It ties into how you can create additional offers that get your ideal clients coming back for more and more and more. And that is episode 75. It's called Client Love, how to keep them coming back with irresistible offers. So it's about trying to leverage what you have in your business and keeping those customers after you found them and won them. Okay, next, your high impact action for today. Mastering your business is not just about listening to stuff. You have to actually get shit done too, right? So grab your pen and paper and map out your current customer journey. Keep it simple. Think about what are the main stages your client go through from the moment they first discover you to becoming loyal raving fans. And like I said at the very start in the intro, it's not about the processes that you take behind the scenes. It's about the stages and steps that your clients take on the front end. And then what I want you to do is think about what feeling or emotion might they have throughout each and every single one of those stages, right? What I like to do with this, it's kind of fun, is add an emoji. I love to use emojis just to draw pictures and, share what that's going to look like. So that's a fun way to do it. That's your high impact action for today. And I do have a customer journey map download. It's a checklist. You're welcome to go and download that. I will add it to the show notes so you can check that out too. Speaking of raving fans, if you loved this episode, be sure to comment under this post or wherever you're listening to it and let us know what's your biggest takeaway. Send me a DM on LinkedIn. I would love to hear what you enjoyed about today's episode and if there's anything else that you'd love to hear on the show. It's a fantastic way to connect with me and other entrepreneurs and keep the conversation about customer experience going. And you know what else? I really believe that in 2025, customer experience, being value driven, being patient in your business are going to be some of the key things that help you not just survive, but really 100% thrive, because people are taking longer to make buying decisions. People pay more for great experiences, and that's what it's all about. It's about finding, winning, and keeping clients, as Ian said. So finally, don't forget to follow, rate, and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts or rating wherever else you're listening. And it really does help us reach more incredible entrepreneurs just like you. So until next time, keep shining bright and keep mastering your business. Bye for now.